My first question to both Argo and Parmesh is that while both of you all have spoken about inclusion being a continuous journey, what were some of the challenges that you all encountered in driving this strategy for LGBTQ inclusion?
So Parmesh, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Maithili. And actually, this comes up every time. It came up a couple of times at Godrej, but it also comes up at other companies as well, because people often don't understand. So, for example, every time one suggests an innovative idea or a way forward, there's always someone who may not understand, and then who at that meeting says, let me play devil's advocate for a minute. And then this devil's advocacy thing, which is thinking things through, opposing a new idea simply because it hasn't been proved before, not willing to try out things, is something that I see a lot. So I see a lot of intent amongst a lot of companies, right? So many companies here have that intent. I think that intent should be accompanied by a spirit of, let's try this out. This is everything that we're doing is very, very new. Often we may not have proof of concept, but we know the direction in which we want to go. So let's try it out, right? And as we try out more things, that's when they become the norm. And then over a course of some years, you think, why were we opposing this, right? It's the same with maternity benefits, for example. I'm sure so many years ago, when people said that we should offer 6 months maternity benefits, there might have been so many people saying, let me play devil's advocate for a minute. But now, it's become the norm, right? It's become the law, actually, more than the norm. Likewise, I see a lot of people not understanding why things like gender affirmation surgery, for example, are so vital. But I must say that if you can explain, if you can actually take the time to explain with love and empathy that this is why this matters, here is why this benefits us all, and you can break through this devil's advocacy kind of barriers, then you can have the systemic change needed in terms of, having your policies in place, hiring more and more people, and, going on that big inclusion impetus. Argo?
So so what I encountered was not any active pushback. Rather, I feel the problem I faced was, it was not high on the priority list for people. It's somewhere there at the edge of your consciousness that LGBT issues are a good thing and we should do something about it. So I would say the main challenge was lack of awareness within the company. And I think what has really helped is actively engaging with everyone and speaking about it. So, I spoke about the Mythbuster pack we did. That itself helped a lot. I mean, most people said we didn't know any of this. And after that, after you make people aware of the challenges being faced, you make people aware that you realize that a very significant portion of our employees are LGBT but are silent about it, then people start to think differently. And I have actually not faced any active pushback in trying to change policies, in rolling out gender neutral washrooms. Yes, one or two really big ticket things, there's been pushback surprisingly from our UK head office, but not at all within the India organization. So that, I would say, was the biggest challenge. There are issues which are burning issues, which are very popular and everyone is behind it. I think with LGBT, the challenge I faced was to bring it to the forefront. It's usually not at the forefront of people's minds.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a very critical thought to make it a priority. And like Parmesh said, once you want to make it a priority, allowing a little bit of experimentation and ideation within the organization. So thank you for that. We already have a lot of questions coming in from our delegates. And one of the questions asked is, how do you see smaller organizations embracing these changes? And the word used here is embracing this colorful personality.
So if I can go first, I mean, honestly, I've always worked in large banks, but I would have thought it would be much easier to do in smaller organizations. in large corporate setups, there is inertia, there is policy, there are committees, there are 101 decision makers. And actually, it's very difficult to drive a big cultural change in large organizations. It can sometimes be a frustratingly slow or gradual process. Whereas if it's a small organization, small organizations are usually very driven by the top, the leader, the CEO, the proprietor, and I would have thought that in a smaller organization, as long as the leadership really embraces it, it should be much easier to transform. I don't know, Parmesh, what's your view?
Yeah, completely. I actually think that, as with most other things in life, also size shouldn't matter for inclusion. Your intent should matter. So I think really, and from my own experience also, I have seen there are big organizations who have gone on the inclusion journey, and there are small. Just to give you an example, about 10 years ago, the Tata Group, Tata Steel, as well as the Lalit Group of hotels, both went on a very visible inclusion journey. Tata Steel is huge, and the Lalit Group of hotels is a small to mid-sized hotel chain, right? It's nowhere in terms of, it's not in the of Taj or Oberoi or Hilton's, etc., right? But as of today, both Tata Steel is, of course, acknowledged as a pioneer, and Lalit Group of hotels, as of this year, has hired more than 100 LGBTQ individuals across all properties, across all roles as well, right? So really, size doesn't matter. It's your intent with which you pursue your inclusion agenda. And that intent comes when you understand how really being inclusive is win-win for everyone. Of course, it's a great win for the LGBTQ talent that you're getting on board. But it's really a win to you as well, right? In terms of money, innovation, whichever dimension you look at it. And I think smaller organizations, as Argo said, it's easier to drive it through. And I'm seeing more and more interest among smaller organizations because, to promote Queeristan, I've been talking to so many industry bodies, whether FICCI, CII, AIMA, and so on. And the most interesting questions are coming from small and medium-sized enterprises, whether from Jabalpur, whether from Jalandhar, from all over the country, right? We have organizations from all over, and some of the most interesting questions are coming from there. Some of the most interesting entrepreneurs want to bring about a change there. So I'm seeing that happen.
Absolutely. I think organizations are also responding to the nuanced culture of the Indian landscape as well. The next question, and I'm going to ask Parmesh to take it first, because there are two questions related to recruitment. One is, how do you create momentum in the recruitment phase? And what are some of the things that you have done in organizations or seen? And the second part of this question is, should people be open about their orientation at this stage? And should this be asked upfront?
Okay, so let me answer the second one first. And I think the question should be reversed. I think the question should be, how inclusive is a company or an organization so that the employee can be comfortable enough to share themselves with the organization? I don't think it should be, where should people be open or not. The onus is on the organization to become that great place to work, where it's not even an issue of whether you should come out or not, because the policies are in place, that everyone is sensitized, that you won't be treated badly, that it won't affect your promotions or your career graph and so on. When an organization can ensure an environment like this, but naturally more and more employees will share this with the organization. I think to put the onus on the employee is very, very unfair. The onus, your policies and your culture will always precede the employees having the confidence in the organization to come out, not the other way around, right? So that's one. What was the first one again? If you can just, yeah.
First one is, what are some of the things you have done, Parmesh?
In the recruitment space, yeah. So I think there's a bunch of things that any organization can do in terms of recruiting. Obviously, if you have queer people already, they serve as great reference points. So word of mouth is very important. There's now an incredible ecosystem out there, whether consultants like Periphery, which you can engage with for specific transgender hiring, whether job fairs like that of Rise, Vivid, Curious, and so on. there's a full D&I ecosystem of providers out there that can help you recruit. There are also small nudges and tricks that you can do. So every profile, for example, if you just put a little rainbow box around every profile and indicate in every profile, we are an LGBTQ inclusive company, etc. It just, it signals to every employee that this is an organization that I am, that I would like to join, because they're signaling to me that I'm welcome. So there's a bunch of things that you as an organization can do. I think the key is active hiring. The key is translating all that intent and actually going out and making those offers and bringing more and more LGBTQ people into your organization. I think that's the key. The infrastructure is set up out there, and Godrej and so many other companies are using that infrastructure. But how do you take that and actually bring people in?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, agree with everything Parmesh said. I think on disclosure, our policy is disclosure is, your personal choice. We don't ask the question. We don't want to ask the question. And I think it's very insightful of Parmesh to say that, is your culture such that people feel, comfortable in opening up? I mean, that's a really good yardstick to look at your own culture. On the recruitment front, we have done all that Parmesh has said. So we have gone to job fairs, we have participated in RISE, we have launched an internship program called Transcend. My personal focus actually is, our mainline hiring is on the normal campuses. We go to graduate colleges in the cities to hire BComs. We go to engineering colleges to hire engineers for technology. We go to MBA institutes. And what I've ensured is, in all those campuses where we go year after year and hire hundreds, we say loudly and clearly and proudly that we are diversity friendly. I think that is going to make the difference. Just, I feel going to a fair and hiring 2 people a year to tick the box is tokenism. I'm sorry, but that's my view. I feel your mainline hiring has to change and has to clearly proclaim that we are diversity friendly. We want you to join us. And if that puts off some people, so be it. This is what we stand for. And I think that is something we need to think about, that your main recruitment channel, what changes have you made? The people who you're sending as recruiters who do the interviews, and where we hire junior people in the hundreds, you have not very senior people doing the first level of interviews. How do they react? How do they portray the company? I think these are things which need to be looked at. And so I think look at your main recruitment channels where the bulk of your people are coming through, and see what changes you need to make there. If you truly want to be a diversity friendly company.
Thank you. Yes, Parmesh.
Can I just add to that? Yeah, so Argo, we've also found that, when we go on campuses and talk to students, often the first question will be about LGBT rights because they've seen it. So, young people, not just LGBTQ talent, but straight talent also really values companies that stand up for LGBTQ inclusion. That's one thing. The other, a lot of companies are doing this very well. They are, because not all hires are at high level or, management level hires, right? There's so many hires that you do, people who have different levels of skill. So a lot of organizations are now tying up, like with Transcend, like Argo, what you said with Transcend, like tying up with community organizations and combining skill building with the potential of hiring. So I know Periphery did some workshops as well with Bank of America and other organizations as well, where trans employees were put through a 6-week skill building program, at the end of which everyone got certificates, and some of them were absorbed, but the others, and everyone actually got a job offer from another organization, if not the organization that funded it, right? So it met the CSR objectives as well of skilling, but it also created, it upskilled talent from the trans community so that the trans community members could have jobs. So I think looking at innovative, not thinking of hiring just as MBA levels or engineers, but looking at it everywhere in the value chain would also be useful.
Thank you for that, Parmesh. We have another question before we, I think, have a few more minutes to go. How do we align traditional mindsets that exist in the organization? I think it speaks to how do we make everybody a co-owner of this inclusion journey by aligning these mindsets. So any thoughts on that?
So you want me to go first? So I've had a few interesting discussions with pretty senior peer group people, and my way is simple. This is what the company represents. This is what we want to be as a company. This is our value system. And honestly, if this makes you extremely uncomfortable, we are not going to change the company's values. Maybe you need to reconsider whether it's the right company for you. So I'm sorry, I have a very blunt approach to this, but that's my approach. I don't know, Parmesh, if you have some insight on how to address a more conservative, section within a company or organization.
Yeah, so I think clear direction from the top, as Argo is saying, is very important. Even at Godrej, we had very clear indication. So many years ago, on the first ever IDA Hobbit, which is International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia, Anisa Godrej sent out a message to every employee saying, today is IDA Hobbit. We at Godrej stand for inclusion. These are our values. This is what we've always believed in since our founding. If anyone has an issue with it, please contact me directly, but this is what we stand for. And then how that clear messaging translates through the organization. What I found that two other things also really work. One is one has to, when there are people who might be older and more conservative, one has to emphasize in India that being LGBTQ and LGBTQ inclusion is very much part of Indian culture. We have a rich history of diversity and inclusion in our country. In fact, homophobia is what the British brought in when they brought in 377. And in 2018, homophobia went away. But we want, 2018, 377 went away. We want homophobia to go. I wish homophobia went away. So how do we go? Because what does it mean to be a good Indian? Means to be inclusive. And I think in India, to say that this is deep rooted, these are not foreign values. Inclusion is very much part of our own Indian value. That's one. And two is when you link it to families. If it's conservative or older people, you make it personal. You link it to families. You tell them, let me tell you about how my mother accepted me. You're thinking like this. What if it was your child? What if, so I think personalizing and talking about the history also has a great way of breaking through some of these barriers so that people are willing to listen and understand and include.
Thank you so much, Parmesh and Argo. One, for telling us that we need bold and courageous leadership to drive inclusion, and also that intent is extremely important, and we need to carry that through in every action that we take, whether big, large, everyday, or long term. So thank you so much for your time. I would also like to thank all the delegates who joined us today and participated and shared their curiosity with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks to Sanjeet and the Great Place to Work team. Really good.